So, dear student, in the previous class, we concluded a point that there is a close relationship or a close correspondence between the question of the linguistic phenomena expanding in space and time, and the spatial and temporal spread of literary models. So, the relation between the literary models and the linguistic phenomena. The literary models and linguistic phenomena. Okay, even such a discontinuous expansion. The fact is that this expansion is not continuous expansion. This expansion is not continuous expansion. Okay, but it is a discontinuous expansion. Even such a discontinuous expansion. Okay, in the dimension of the time, in the axis of the time, okay, in the axis of the space, we may go, but it is not continuous process. Okay, discontinuous process. This expansion is discontinuous, but though it is discontinuous, that means we can't find at a stretch the continuous process. Okay, discontinue for some time and again may continue like this. Okay, for example, let me tell you, the emperor, the Mughal emperors, for example, the Mughal emperors. Okay, there may be a last one. In the history, we came to know that there is a last name, for example. Okay, for example, Aurangzeb. Okay, of course, there are other people after him. For example, Aurangzeb. Okay, up to him, we know the history. Okay, after that, we can find 3 or 4 generations. Okay, after 3 and 4 generations, if we could find any new one, any emperor who is unknown to the world, who though he is great, okay, after many years, if we find him now, his greatness, his ruling, his efforts and his skills, then we can count him in that hierarchy, okay, in that hierarchy we will count him. Okay, in the same manner, okay, for example, a Telugu poet, there are certain Telugu poets in 1980s, for example. In that decade, in 1980s or in 1880s, for example, if we could find 10 Telugu poets in that period, okay, we conclude in the history, okay, historically, or in the history of that literature of the 1880 decade, okay, then we will count only those 10. But after this 2 or 3 centuries, okay, if we can find any poet who contributed something to that particular age, okay, after 3 decades, if he was found, even we can count him in that list. That's what he is going to tell us. Okay, that's what he is going to tell us. Though he was found now, though such a poet or his contribution and his excellency was found or came to know, okay, if we came to know about him in this time, in this 2021, still we can place him in that list, not in 2021 list. We can place him in 1980s list. Okay, there is such flexibility to fix this newly discovered, newly found poet who belongs to that particular age. Okay, we can take him to that age. We can fix him in that order. What does it mean? Even such a discontinuous expansion, discontinuous expansion as a resurrection of neglected or forgotten poets. Resurrection. Resurrection means okay, born again. Born again. That means after death again. If one reborn or a rebirth, we can say resurrection may be a rebirth. Okay, if that particular writer or if that poet in literature is forgotten, if he was neglected or forgotten, okay, if you could find any such forgotten or a neglected poet, we can find even in this in such a discontinuous expansion, we can find or we can place him, okay, in that particular list, in that particular period. What does it mean? We are giving again birth. Okay, that sort of thing is a rebirth. Okay, that means vivify. Okay, we can say. Okay, so as a resurrection of neglected or forgotten poets, find a parallel, find a parallel in the history of standard languages, okay, which are prone to revive, outdated models, sometimes long forgotten, outdated models, sometimes long forgotten. What does it mean here? In these literary studies, okay, in this literary art, we can revive or we can give rebirth to those poets who are neglected or who are forgotten. By going into the history, we can revivify them. Okay, we can revive them. Okay, so then they may find the parallel in the history of the standard languages. They may find the parallel. Okay, parallelly they may be placed, no doubt at all. So this field, that is the field of the poetics. Okay, where this science may study the literary art. Okay, those forgotten poets, those neglected poets may find their place if it is historical study. In that historical study, if we could find such poets, then we can place them, okay, parallel to that particular period, or here parallel to his contemporaries, we can say. So here the problem is this. Roman Jacobson says that why these two fields were separated, why this poetics is considered to be concerned with only evaluation, and why the separation of the two fields each other. Okay, that is the fields, the poetics and other verbal arts or other verbal behaviors. The poetics and other verbal behaviors. These two are separated. Okay, because of these reasons. What we discuss now. Okay, casual. Okay, non-casual and purposeful character of the poetic language, and a casual and designless nature of the other types of verbal structures. That may be one reason which made them to separate, which made all other scholars to separate these two fields. But here, Roman Jacobson, he presented that it is erroneous interpretation. It is the wrong interpretation, right? So he says, unfortunately, the terminological confusion is there. Terms, there is a confusion with the terms. There is a confusion with the terms. Unfortunately, the terminological confusion of the literary text, literary studies with literary criticism. Literary studies with literary criticism. You see, we are discussing, actually our topic, our paper is literary criticism, but here he is presenting another title, that is literary studies. Okay, then what is the difference between these two? That's what he is going to question. That's what he is going to question. In general, literary studies deals with all the genres of the literature: poetry, drama, novel, and prose. Okay, the from art point of view, that may be studied. Okay, moreover, that study is interdisciplinary. Okay, in that study of literary studies, okay, these literary works may be studied in connection with other disciplines, such as economics, politics, anthropology, sociology. By connecting these literary texts with those studies, okay, those fields, okay, the scholars may study the literary text. This is literary studies. But here he says that, okay, this Roman Jacobson says that, unfortunately, the terminological confusion of this literary studies with literary criticism tempts the students of literature, to replace the description of the intrinsic values of literary work by a subjective censorious verdict. Okay, by a subjective censorious verdict. Okay, so here from the outside, okay, having subjective perspective, okay, subjective notions, okay, there's a in this they attempt, the students of the literature, may be tempted, because of this terminological confusion, okay, the students of the literature may be tempted to replace the description of the intrinsic values of the literary work by a subjective censorious verdict. Okay, what are these students, what these students have been doing? Okay, they have been replacing, as they are tempted by this confusion, they have been replacing the description of the intrinsic values of the literary work. What is intrinsic? Within it, the values within the text, the values within the literary text, okay, by a subjective. Okay, subject, what is the subjective? From our personal point of view, we may foster or we may include our opinions rather than the writer opinion. Okay, rather than the intrinsic value of the text, okay, or the literary work, these scholars, they may try to replace, okay, the description of the intrinsic value of literary work by a subjective censorious verdict. Okay, what is censorious verdict? He mentioned the word. Okay, having some set of rules, okay, the scholars or the critics, they may criticize this literary text. Okay, from their subjective point of view, they may criticize. For example, see the definition of William Wordsworth. He says that, okay, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of our thoughts, okay, recollected in tranquility. What does it mean? Okay, there is a flow of thought in our mind, Okay, then when we are in a when we are in peaceful mood, we will recollect them and we will write something. That is the poetry, he said. Okay, now he may say that now Raman Jacobson, from his perspective, we can understand that why it shouldn't be a spontaneous writing, why it should be a recollection again. Okay, likewise, there may be some questions. There may be some questions. Okay, 3 unities, for example, 3 unities. Okay, the scholars, okay, even some scholars, they opposed Shakespeare, you know. Though some scholars are there who opposed the greatness of Shakespeare. Okay, arguing that Shakespeare didn't follow the 3 unities properly. Okay, so here the question is, such rows, pre-ruling rows or predetermined rows, and having predetermined rows and the subjective opinions, okay, they are criticizing or they are studying the literary works with those aspects. Okay, instead of finding the real intrinsic values of the literary text, try to understand this point. Instead of finding the real intrinsic values of the literary text, they are trying to, okay, they are trying to, okay, contribute their own feelings, their subjective thoughts, okay, their personal feelings or their personal ideas. Okay, in this way they are making some wrong notions to this analysis of literary text. This is what Roman Jacobson mentioned. Okay, the label literary critic applied to an investigator of literature. An investigator of literature is as erroneous as a grammatical critic would be applied to a linguist. Okay, even he is going to clarify the terminological confusion of the word literary studies and literary criticism. Try to understand this point carefully. The label literary critic applied to an investigator of the investigator of the literature is erroneous. He says that if anyone who investigates the literature, if anyone is there who investigates the literature, according to him, it is erroneous if we call him a critic. It is erroneous if we call him a critic. Okay, the task of the critic is not only to investigate the literature, something more. His duty is different. Okay, all the investigators of the literature are not critics, he says. Okay, if we call them or if we call him critic, it is as much erroneous as, okay, grammatical critic would be applied to a linguist. Okay, if we apply the word, if we call linguist a grammatical critic, if we call linguist a grammatical critic, it is wrong. Okay, so we can't call linguist simply a grammatical critic. In the same manner, he says that we can't call the investigator of the literature as a literary critic, right? He says that. Okay, so syntactic and morphological research can't be supplanted by a normative grammar. What is normative grammar? If we have a standard systematic rules and principles of a language, Okay, if we have a standard system of rules and principles of a language, that is normative grammar. That is normative grammar. Okay, but in the normative grammar, we do not study syntactic and morphological aspects. In the grammar, in the normative grammar, we do not study syntactic and morphological aspects. Okay, so it is wrong. If we replace, instead of normative grammar, instead of instead of linguistics, okay, if we call it normative grammar, instead of linguist, okay, if we call grammatical critic, it is erroneous. It is erroneous because, okay, the syntactic and morphological research can't be replaced, can't be supplanted by a normative grammar. Supplanted means we can't substitute. We can't substitute in the place of this syntactic and morphological research can't be substituted by normative grammar. Okay, normative grammar is a separate thing, but syntactical and morphological research is not like that, not like this normative grammar. That is there is a difference. Okay, moreover, we can't substitute this normative grammar. Try to understand this point. We can't substitute the normative grammar, okay, in the place of this linguistics, or in the place of this syntactic and morphological research or morphological study. Okay, so if you call okay, an investigator of the literature as a literary critic, it is as much erroneous as to call a linguist as a grammatical critic. Okay, to call linguist as a grammatical critics, that is wrong. That is erroneous statement. Okay, so yeah, that's why he says that no manifesto fostering a critic's own taste and opinions on creative literature may act as substitute for an objective scholarly analysis of verbal art. What is he saying? Okay, in case of literary criticism, critic, okay, foster means మన అభిప్రాయాల్ని అవతల వ్యక్తుల మీద రుద్దడం. ఓకే, మన అభిప్రాయాలను అవతల వ్యక్తుల మీద రుద్దడం. సో likewise, no manifesto fostering a critic's own tastes and opinions on creative literature. Okay, in this literary criticism, it is the critic's own taste and opinions on the creative literature. Okay, from his taste, from his point of view, he may criticize, that may act as a substitute. Okay, there is no such manifest which can act as a substitute for an objective scholarly analysis of verbal art. Here we are finding two modes. Here we can find two ways. One is opinion, that means personal taste and opinions. Okay, attributing personal taste and opinions subjectively on the creative literature, that is one aspect. Another one is objectively, not including our personal opinions, objectively scholarly analysis, that is objectively scholarly analysis of verbal art, not based on favoritism, not based on our personal opinions. Okay, the literary work or the verbal art may be analyzed. The verbal art may be analyzed. objective scholarly analysis of the verbal art. This is the difference between these two fields. Okay, just he gave some idea, but still there is no clear cut discrimination. There is no clear cut difference between these two. That's why there is a question. There is a question. Actually, there is a clear-cut discrimination is made between the pure and applied linguistics. Pure and applied linguistics. There is a clear-cut discrimination, or there is a clear-cut difference between pure linguistics and applied linguistics. And like that, between the phonetics and orthopy, that studies the parts of the grammar. Okay, the parts of the grammar which deals with pronunciation. Okay, dealing with pronunciation all the time need not to be phonetics. Okay, so there is a clear distinction between the phonetics and orthopy. Okay, but why is a clear cut? Why is a clear cut discrimination is not made? Why is a clear-cut discrimination is not made between literary studies and literary criticism? Literary studies and literary criticism. That is the question now. Okay, so literary studies with poetics as their focal portion. In the literary studies, poetics is the main focal portion. Literary studies, the poetics is the main topic in literary studies. The poetics is the major topic in literary studies. Okay, the study literariness of the language, the literariness of the verbal message, that is poetics. So in the literary studies, what makes that work of art literary? Okay, the major topic is that one. That's why literary studies with the poetics as their focal portion consist like linguistics of two sets of problems. Okay, even in literary studies, okay, consist. Okay, even in literary studies like linguistics, we may find two sets of problems. One is okay, synchronic, and another one diachronic. One is synchronic, another one diachronic, right? So literary studies consist of two problems, consist of two sets of the problems. One is synchrony and another one diachrony, like linguistics. Okay, in the first semester, we studied what is the diachronic linguistics and what is synchronic linguistics. What is diachronic linguistics? If we go back to the history, okay, if we move back to the history, or if we move back to the past temporally, in the temporal and spatial dimensions, okay, then that is diachronic linguistics. In the same manner, okay, even we can find, okay, even in these literary studies, we can find the diachronic study of the literary text. The diachronic study of the literary text, that means going back into the past, history. Okay, at the same time, what is synchrony, or a synchronic problem? That is the contemporary, or at present, or at a given time. So the synchronic description envisages not only the literary production of any given stage, any given stage. Try to understand synchronic study or synchronic description. Synchronic description envisages not only the literary production of any given stage, but also that part of the literary tradition, that part of the literary tradition. Okay, in this synchronic description, okay, not only the literary production may be studied, even the literary tradition will be studied. Even the focus may be on literary traditions, right? So what is the tradition? If a number of poets or if the number of analysts or the critics follow the same method, that is a tradition. If they follow the same method, that is a tradition. For example, if I believe that there is a God, I will try to find the existence of God in the work. That is my idea. Okay, if anyone who does not believe the God, he may find that there is no place in that literary work for the God. Okay, even they do not think of the God in that literary text. What is happening? Okay, having some presumptions, we may follow or we may believe certain things, and based on our beliefs, okay, we can analyze that literary text. That's what happening. Okay, if more number of critics follow the same tradition, the same set of thinking, that is tradition, literary tradition. What is this? The synchronic description envisages not only the literary production of a given any given stage, or any given period, we can say, or at any time. Okay, but also that part of the literary tradition, even it envisages to study that part of the literary tradition. So the selection of classics and their reinterpretation by a novel trend, novel, okay, NOVEL, novel means new trend here. Okay, the selection of classics and their reinterpretation by a novel trend is a substantial problem of synchronic literary study. But in this synchronic literary study, there is a substantial problem. There is an upcoming problem. That is the selection of classics and their reinterpretations by a novel trend. Okay, when we interpret something, okay, we may interpret with the novel thinking. We may interpret with the novel thinking. Okay, so dear students, ikkada em jarugutundi? Yeah, see what is happening here. Okay, see the selection of classics and their reinterpretation by a novel trend is a substantial problem of the synchronic literary studies. Whatever the new trend comes in literary studies or in literary criticism. Okay, we used to criticize those classics, and we used to reinterpret those classics with the present knowledge. Okay, for example, test tube babies, that is the this 20th century or 21st century knowledge. Okay, then if we apply that knowledge to Mahabharata, then all Kauravas can be considered as test tube babies, because they were born in pots, they were born in clay pots. Okay, that's why here any new knowledge comes, any new trend comes, we used to reinterpret the classics, we used to reinterpret the earlier text or the earlier knowledge with this new trend. That is a substantial problem for this synchronic study of literary works. The synchronic study of literary work. So the synchronic poetics, the synchronic poetics, like synchronic linguistics, is not to be confused with statics, is not to be confused with statics. Okay, in the study of synchronic study, in this synchronic study, it is not static. Okay, these synchronic studies are not static. Okay, they are not stable. Okay, they are not rigid. They change. They change. They are dynamic. Okay, we can't change the past history. Okay, Ashoka, the emperor, the emperor Ashoka was, okay, the great emperor of that Magadha, the great emperor of that Magadha, or the emperor of Mauryas, the empire of Mauryas, the empire of Mauryas. Okay, then we can't change the fact. We can't change the fact, but the present language, the present fact may be changed. The present fact may be changed. That's why synchronic poetics, like synchronic linguistics, is not static. It should not be confused with static, because it is not static. It is dynamic. It may changes in the course of time. It may changes in the course of time, right? So any contemporary stage is experienced in its temporal dynamics. Any contemporary stage is experienced in its temporal dynamics. And on the other hand, the historical approach, both in poetics and in linguistics, is concerned not only with the changes, but also with continuous, enduring static factors. Okay, if it is so, the contemporary is dynamic. If then, what is the history? Static. What is the history? History is the static. So in this historical approach, what can we find? What were changed? What were changed? Okay, in this temporal dynamics. What were changed in this temporal dynamics? For example, now we are crazily using the word bro-in-law. Okay, sis-in-law. Okay, after 10 years or after 20 years, okay, the new critics or the new scholars may study why brother was changed to bro. Okay, how it changed. Likewise, okay, historical approach will study how these changes happen. What are the changes happen, how these changes happen, and they may continuously, they may try to find out what are the static factors. What are the static factors? Okay, all the language won't be changed, all the language won't be changed. Only some of the parts, only some of the words, only some of the set of vocabulary may be changed. Okay, then surely if we go with historical perspective or historical approach, then we can find how those changes have come. Okay, and in addition to that, they may study what are the static features that continued. What are the static features that continued? Okay, after century ago, 1 century ago, we said good morning. Now still we are saying good morning. Okay, all the time, the beginning of the day we call morning. There is no change. That is a static feature. That is a static factor. Okay, for example, in case of simple present tense, subject V1 plus object or subject V5 plus object. Okay, the structure, that structure was not changed. That structure was not changed. It is static. It is static. Likewise, there are certain, if we find, okay, if we approach that literary text with a historical approach, then we can find both in poetics and in linguistics. Okay, in both in poetics and in linguistics, this historical approach is concerned. This historical approach is concerned not only with the changes, but also with the continuous enduring static factors, continuous enduring static factors. Okay, unchanged or stable factors, we can say stable factors. Okay, what are the factors that are strongly continued, that are strongly existed or survived? Okay, that may be studied in this historical approach. That may be studied in this historical approach, right? So insistence on keeping poetics apart from the linguistics is warranted. There is another reason why we keep on continuing, we keep on separating, this poetics from linguistics. There is another reason. That reason, okay, this separation was warranted only when the field of linguistics appears to be illicitly restricted. Okay, so the field of linguistics, if the field of linguistics is restricted, then we can find okay, this if insistence on keeping poetics apart from linguistics is warranted only when the field of linguistics appears to be illicitly restricted. Okay, if the field of linguistics appears to be restricted, then there is a warranty. We may think, there is a chance to think that these two fields are different. That is, poetics and linguistics are different. We may think because of the warranty. Okay, for example, he says, when the sentence is viewed by some linguists as the highest analyzable construction. Okay, for example, okay, to the linguist, let us suppose a sentence is viewed, or a sentence may be the highest analyzable construction. That's why, yeah, even the linguist thought like that. That's why they studied in tenses only simple sentence was studied. Okay, a single sentence was studied. Okay, the sentence pattern based on single sentence was studied. Okay, if when the sentence is viewed by some linguist as the highest analyzable construction, what does it mean? Why should we call it highest? Because other than this sentence, there is a word is small, syllable is more small. First smallest thing, syllable, then word, some more combination of syllables. Okay, some more larger. This sentence combination of words, it is more larger. Beyond that, there is no such a construction for some linguists. Okay, sentence itself is the highest analyzable construction. Okay, or when the scope of linguistics is confined to the grammar. Okay, what may happen if the linguist all the time study only the sentence and its component parts? What is the use of linguistics? What is the use to be a linguist? Okay, already the grammarians, they analyze the letter, they analyze the sentence. They analyze the sentence and they analyze what are the constituent parts in that sentence and how to construct a sentence. They are already analyzed. Then what is the role of linguist? Okay, is his role limited only to the study of confined to the grammar? Okay, if it is so, if we think like that, if we think that the linguistic study is the scope of linguistics is confined to the grammar alone, confined to the grammar alone, or if the sentence is viewed as the highest analyzable construction, in this case, oh, okay, or to the inventory of the denotative devices with no reference to the free variation. Okay, inventory of the denotative, all the time denotative. Okay, if all the time something is denotative, if all the time we can call, we should call the meeting of two the meeting of two vehicles, that is accident. All the time we should call accident. Then what is the freeness? What is the reference for free variation? Okay, what does it mean? Instead of calling accident, can't we use anything? Do we not have any freedom to call it in another way? Surely we will have. But if we think it is all the time denotative, if it is all the time denotative, if the linguistics is limited to the grammar alone, okay, if a linguist consider only the sentence as the highest analyzable construction, then this separation is there. Then there will be a separation. Surely there will be a separation between these two fields. One is poetics and linguistics. But he says that these are all wrong things. He says that these are all wrong things. Okay, yeah, these things made them to think like that, Okay, insistence on keeping poetics apart from the linguistics is warranted. Apart from linguistics, keeping poetics apart from linguistics is warranted when this linguistics is restricted. How it was restricted? It may be confined to the grammar alone, okay, or it may be confined to the denotative function alone, or it may be considered only the sentence as the highest analyzable construction. These are all limitations. These are all restrictions to the linguistics. If we think that those are only the scope, those are only the ways, they are only the scope of this linguistics. Okay, if we limit the scope of linguistics to this grammar, okay, to this sentence analysis, to this denotative function only, then we can think, or it make us believe that these two fields are different. Poetics and linguistics are different. Okay, he says that Raman Jacobson says that in fact they are not different. They are not separate field. They are not separate fields. Okay, because okay, there are certain regions. There are certain regions, right? Dear students, he discussed, okay, why these scholars, why these people, they felt that linguistics and poetics are two different studies, two different disciplines, or two different aspects. Okay, so he discussed what are the reasons, what made them to believe like that. Okay, how it was guaranteed, how that separation was guaranteed by some regions, by some restrictions. Okay, this is what we discussed in this class today. Okay, dear students, try to understand these points carefully. Okay, so literary critic is not a investigator of literature. Literary critic is not a investigator of literature. If we think so, it is erroneous, as in the case of linguist as a grammatical critic. Linguist as grammatical critic, because if you call linguist as a grammatical critic, that is utterly wrong. That is utterly wrong. Okay, that is utterly error. That's why we should not call linguist as a grammatical critic. In the same manner, we should not call investigator of literature as a critic. That's what Roman Jakobson told us. Okay, dear students, the remaining points we shall discuss in the next class, as it is already 3 o'clock. Okay, then I will discuss the remaining points in the next class. Okay, tomorrow class. I will inform you before. I will try to take class tomorrow